Tell me what it was like growing up in your childhood.
Chaos is the best word to describe it. I lost the mum that I had. She'd become a monster. At the end of a horrible beating he'd give my mum, she told him that I wasn't his son.
And how did that journey take you into using coke?
The majority of people using drugs at a young age come from some sort of similar trauma. I earned money from a very young age. I had my own business when I was 15, and I would buy friends. The only reason the majority of them were there was because of the substance that I was providing. So I think the big indicator was when you start doing it alone. So I had no job and 20 to 30 grand coming in every 3 months. I was a fucking addict dude.
Elliott, Wald, addiction specialist. Coming clean with me.
Hello, I'm Elliott Wald, addiction specialist, and welcome to another episode of Coming Clean with Me. And here today is my guest, Zach Oliver. Zach grew up experiencing a lot of trauma, and so this began a 15-year battle to deal with his addiction. Good morning, Zach, and how are you doing?
Good morning, Elliott.
Thank you for being here. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Not
Good.
too bad at all. How are you?
I'm good, Zach. So tell me, let's take you back right through to your childhood. Tell me what it was like growing up in your childhood.
Oh, chaos is the best word to describe it, to be honest with you. It was up until about 5. It was kind of normal working class life. Mum and dad were happily married. Dad worked. Mum was the housewife, just as it was back in the early 90s. But when I turned 4 or 5, I think she became alcoholic. Turned to alcohol just because after having my little sister, she had really bad post-natal depression. I think she suffered a lot as a child as well. I think she was abused by her stepdad. So obviously that was troubling her, and I guess got to a point where she just couldn't cope and turned into an alcoholic, and I lost my mum very quickly. In terms of, she was alive, she didn't die, but I lost the mum that I had. She became a monster. She turned into just an insane woman around the house, pissing in the kitchen bin, standing up like a man, laughing her head off. I'm just like witnessing it, like I'm not there. It's like I'm invisible. And then, as you can imagine, my dad just come home. He'd lost his partner, his friend, his life. He'd come home to a completely trashed house, just everything in bits. Kids running around with dirty nappies and no dinner cooked. He's having to do the washing. Eventually, he just snapped, and then end up just having this vile, abusive, battering relationship where there was just violence every day. And then Dad was the same with all of us, more particularly with me, because at the end of a horrible beating he'd give my mum, she told him that I wasn't his son, just to kind of try and stick a knife in, although I am his son. It was just something that she wanted to try and hurt him with. So yeah, he's very focused on hurting me, I guess, more than the rest.
Can you tell us about some of the incidents that occurred?
Yeah, he smashed my mum's head through a bathroom sink, threw me down the stairs, put me through the patio window.
How old were you?
Anywhere between 5 and 10, all the way from 5 till 10, so 5 years. Yeah, what I can remember, I can't remember much before that, but yeah, it was hard to go through that side of things. But I think what was harder was when we was leaving constantly, being woken up in the middle of the night by my mum, face black and blue, and then she's going, I'm leaving, Dad, you're going to come with me? And I'll just sort of cry my eyes out and say, yeah, because I love my mum. She was my everything before she was an alcoholic. My dad just worked a lot and didn't really see much of him. He did as much as he could with the energy he had left, but mostly it was mum, and I was very affectionate, and so was my mum. I was different to the rest. We both had blue eyes, we looked like each other, so she was my everything. So of course I would always go with her, and then going back going back to him after a couple of months of being dragged into a hostel in the middle of the night, beaten up by the other kids there. I remember getting smashed in the face with a metal pole once by another kid. In these houses, these hostels are just full of all the same type of situations. It's women fleeing abusive husbands, kids traumatized, broken. You put all them together in a house. It's just,
You're in a melting pot of abuse.
Yeah, and I think I lost my sweetness. I was a very sweet, lovely boy. Just loved nature, loved animals, and Loved dogs. You know, my dad used to beat all the dogs, and we had to get rid of them. And then, you know, he'd get another one to kind of win my mum back over and get her to not leave him, essentially. And then he'd end up beating that one up, and then we'd have to get rid of that one because it would turn violent, or we had to put one down because it ripped one of my brother's friend's nose through there because it was so violent from this scene, like getting between my mum and dad when they were fighting. He bit my mum on the breast, he bit my dad through the hand, you know. So it's just, yeah, it was sad, like all of those things just over and over again. I think what made it even harder though is that he really loved my older brother, so I kind of saw this ability that he had to actually be a decent dad, but I just never got to experience it, and I was just yearning forever to try and have that, try and impress him. I think it was why I was so driven to be successful, because subconsciously I always just wanted him to say, well done, and I'm proud of you. And even when I had a multi-million-pound turnover and profit business, he still never said it. So I kind of let go of that dream a long time ago. But I don't think it ever goes to a certain extent. You'd always want your parents to be proud of you when
you were looking for his recognition.
Yeah, and it, you know, it just never come. But yeah, I mean, that gives a little snapshot of what it was like. It was hard. It was just trauma all the time, really.
How did that translate into going to school?
Yeah, my behaviour was very abnormal, I guess. I was very distrusting of people, so I could never really have close friendships because I'd always end up sabotaging them. I was a self-sabotage all the time. But also, I was experiencing, you know, so much violence towards women, and I also hated and resented my mum for what she did. So I developed a real big hatred for women. So I got in fights with girls at school. I remember a girl told me I couldn't dance once, so I just punched her in the face. So I just thought that was normal. You know, that's what you saw. Yeah. I wasn't top. As far as I was concerned, that's how you treated a woman. You know, so yeah, I was just a very broken little boy and just didn't know my place in the world at all.
And how did that journey take you into using coke and alcohol, etc.?
I think the majority of people using drugs at a young age come from some sort of similar trauma. So you always attract what you are, I found in my life. So you end up getting rejected by, you know, the kids who I say normal, you know, have perhaps a more loving and stable environment that they grow up in, and your behaviour's very abnormal to them and you get pushed away. So what happens is you have these group of kind of misfits that kind of group together around taking drugs because we want to be naughty. You know, we've probably seen drug use at home. My mum was also a pill addict, and, you know, she was overdosing a lot as well. That's another thing I didn't mention. You know, she tried to commit suicide twice. She had to call the ambulance for her to send her to the hospital, not knowing if she'll ever come back. But yeah, so you kind of meet those people where you feel normal. That's where you feel accepted and you can relate and identify with. Good. You relate to these people. You relate to the fact that they're like you, they're traumatized, they're hurt, and it doesn't seem like a bad thing to do drugs. It seems like it's a way to kind of be accepted as well. You know, you've not been accepted for so long, but then you finally find something that you can connect with people over and feel accepted by. And I think a lot of the time as well, I wanted to buy friends with it, because I know they wanted to smoke weed and then they wanted to do coke. I earned money from a very young age. I had my own business when I was 15, and I would buy friends. It was a way for me to keep people around and feel like I was wanted, although the only reason the majority of them were there was because of the substance that I was providing. But at the time, that didn't matter. I just didn't want to be alone. Just didn't want to be alone.
Yeah, I can relate to that so much, because I remember being like 10 years old, and I'm much older than you, but I remember being 10 years old, and before I went to school, and I would be at school at like 7 o'clock in the morning because I wouldn't want to be at home because of the violence and abuse. And I'd go to the corner shop, and like I used to earn money as well as a kid, and I'd spend like a $5 on sweets, and I'd go to the school and I'd give them sweets away. Mm-hmm. Same, very similar principle. Yeah. You want to be loved. You want people to accept you.
Yeah, you want to be seen. You want attention, and I developed a really unhealthy relationship with women as well. You know, like I said, I had this massive resentment and hatred on one side, but also a huge dependency on trying to replace what I'd lost at home. So trying to be in, you know, relationships with girls was incredibly hard because I didn't trust them, I didn't respect them, but I yearned for them. So it's almost like I'd bring them in as close as I could, but never close enough, and I'd always keep something to hurt them with to keep them away. So whether it be cheating on them or being dishonest or trying it on with their friend, or, I was just constantly pushing people away, whether that be women I was dating or whether it be friends as well, trying to get with their girlfriends, or just doing something dishonest and disloyal to make sure that nobody could get close.
And what age were you when you first started doing coke?
15.
15.
Yeah, 15. And I loved it. I loved it. I loved the feeling. It was with an older lad. I liked the fact that I was obviously paying for it. I liked the fact that I was with older lads. It felt cool.
Accepted.
Yeah, I felt accepted finally and I generally always hung around with older people, even from 15 onwards. But yeah, I just finally, and that person later on punched me in the face at one point. So it shows the kind of people that this life attracts. You know, a lot of dysfunctional, broken people coming from troubled homes and troubled lives, and people who have low self-worth, low self-esteem, and they all kind of group together and find each other, and they don't feel alone. And yeah.
The misfits.
Yeah, the misfits.
How quickly did your usage of coke escalate?
Yeah, see, this is the thing. Like, some people say addiction happens very quickly. I've seen some people tell me within a year they were doing cocaine every day. And that's not how it happened for me. You know, I was obviously 15, so I couldn't afford to. But I would say it started off very controlled. As in, I didn't have a problem with it until I got till about, I want to say 18, 19. And I remember when it happened, because I started trying to sell it. And it lasted about a month, because within that month I had gone from selling it to making a small profit, to sniffing a bit and making an even lesser profit, to sniffing all the profit, to sniffing it all in 4 weeks. Not going, like turning up late to work, being awake all night, nearly losing my job. And yeah, that was the first time, because I think the big indicator is when you start doing it alone.
Yes.
That for me is the big change.
Yes.
If you're doing it alone, it's a very different experience. And that was my first taste at doing it alone. And then I stopped doing it, weirdly, for a year, because I had to go home, because I changed my job, so my money went down, and I had to go back to my dad's house, which was just fucking vile. And I needed to get out there as soon as I could. So, you know, the desire to use versus the need to leave that house, you know, that superseded that. You know, I needed to get out of there. So I went and I worked my arse off for a year until I had enough money to go and have my own house. Got a really amazing apartment right on the corner above Sainsbury's and Milton Keynes, just below the penthouse, looking out. It's 20 years old, I guess. And yeah, then that's when using come back, and being in that really big sales environment as well, which, yeah, it's everywhere in most sales environments, especially when they're male dominated. So yeah, that's
Fuels the sales for people, right?
some people. Yeah, so I wasn't like that. I'm not a functioner. I'm a binger. So functioning addicts are very different to me. I don't understand them.
I must say, I was functioning, but it's interesting what you say, because I think the journey for so many people is what you just said. It starts off socially, gradually, and then eventually it becomes so antisocial that you end up doing it on your own, that you don't want to go out. I think that's the way it's for so many people. But I have seen patients, Zach, who, I can think of one lady, for example, where she was 35 years old, had never used before, went out with her sister, used once, and the very next day, she went and bought again, the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And from the get-go, she was done. She was there. But that's very unusual. For me, probably, and I think I actually put a video out on TikTok about a year ago, and I said, you know, how long from starting did it become a problem when it was such a regular occurrence? And it went from a week, a month, but the average period of time was 2 years. What sort of period of time was it for you before it caught you?
I'd say because I wasn't using it in any consistent fashion until the age of about 18, 19, where I could afford to. And then it became a weekly thing. And by the time I was 21, it wasn't just weekly. It was, 3-4 times a week. By the time I was 23, game over. 23 was where, it all went wrong, really, for me. That was when I started using as much as possible, and then lost my business. Then 24 to 26, probably some of the worst years of my life. 24, maybe even 27. 24 to 27, 3 worst years of my life. One, I don't remember half of it, but I lost my business, and I lost my position in the business, but I still owned it, so I was still getting the dividends. So I had no job, and 20 to 30 grand coming in every 3 months. What does a fucking addict do with that? And yeah, I lost so much time. I just spent nearly 2 years not really leaving the house, staying awake for 6-7 days at a time, I'd be having to drink alcohol just to be around my son and my stepdaughters that I had, just to feel normal enough to actually engage with them. And that was on a rare occasion. Normally I was just completely absent in another room, just by myself, because I felt so disgusted with myself at that point. I couldn't bear to be around them. I was obsessed. If I needed to do anything with the kids, I'd be washing my hands 10 or 15 times, because I just was so terrified that I'd have coke on my hands and they would somehow get in contact with it. One time I passed out because I'd been awake for so long in the living room when they'd gone to bed, and my missus at the time had to clear up an eighth of coke off the floor because basically the kids would have come in and seen it. And so it was lucky that she got up first. Normally Archie would have been the first one out, but she managed to get up and pick it up, clean it up. And I would imagine that the whole time they're getting ready for school, I'm just passed out in the chair.
And what sort of quantity were you using?
Yeah, I mean, it varied at that point. It was 4 to 7 grams a day.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And then alcohol as to try and level yourself off?
Alcohol to level myself off as much as I could. I'd always overdo it with coke. I very rarely got the balance right, but I'd normally get, like, how it used to be, when I'd get in from work, I'd neck a whole bottle of Disaronno neat, and then I'd sniff a whole gram in a line, and that would start off. And at that point, it kind of was all right, but then it very quickly, within 30 minutes, I just started feeling paranoid and delusional and scared, and I'd just try and drink as much as I could. But then eventually the coke consumes you and you can't drink anymore, for me anyway. I couldn't drink because all I could do was just do more lines. That was it. I was just doing more and more, and it was just, yeah, insanity at that point. You're just hearing and seeing things that aren't there. I used to call them the shadow men. Wow, fucking makes me feel terrified. You know, I used to see like shadow hands coming out of my cupboard, out the wardrobe, sliding the doors, and I used to think they were putting their hands up in the night with my girlfriend at the time, touching her, and I'd be all through the night, I'd be touching down the side of her like this, all through the night, touching, just making sure they're not there. And this would go on for days. You know, days. She'd go to work, come back, go to sleep, and I'd still be awake, and I'd still do the same thing. I'd be sat there all night, light on my phone to do a line, turn it off, sit in the pitch black.
Yeah. It's funny because I had a patient the other day say something very, very similar. He lives at home with his parents, and he does it when he's out, and then he comes home with an 8, for example, and his parents are sleeping in the room next door, and he locks his door, but because his parents are in the room next door, he's pitch black, uses the light, puts a straw in the bag, turns the light on under the cover, completely paranoid.
Oh, it's insane. Yeah, and you're tiptoeing as well. This is the other thing. You're tiptoeing around the house, trying not to make a noise. So I'll be doing this when there's no one in the house. So who the fuck am I trying to be quiet for? But, the insanity as well of looking for something. So I'd always say I'd run out of cigarettes, and then I would search my house upside down, every pillow, every cupboard, every drawer, bed turned up, the whole house just ransacked for a cigarette. But halfway through, I'd forget what I was looking for, but I'd keep looking. So I'm there obsessing over emptying my house and pulling everything apart. I've totally forgot what the fuck it is, but I can't stop myself from physically doing it. I'm so engaged in it and so just consumed by what I'm doing. I have no idea what the fucking agenda is and the whole purpose of what I'm doing is.
How did your wife cope with that?
I was never married, but...
All right, your girlfriend.
Yeah.
How did your girlfriend cope with that?
Well, yeah, she was using a bit as well. I think eventually she kind of did that to cope with me. You know, because I was just so insane all the fucking time. And I was a terrible partner to my son's mum. Cheated on her all the time. We were never really in love. I wanted her to let me go, and she never would. And I just carried on doing the worst things ever to try and get her to leave me.
Self-sabotage.
Yeah, but this was an intentional one though. This was subconscious. Like, I was so unhappy. And every time I tried to move on, it was always her stalking and harassing any girls. So I always ended up back with her, and it was just so toxic for so many years. But, you know, then another girl, lovely girlfriend that I had, she didn't actually use, and then she started using because of me and then got addicted. So, you know, I kind of ruined another girl's life. Fortunately, I've spoken to her not long ago, and she's all good now, and lives a happy life, and I think she's getting married. So luckily I didn't cause too much damage. But yeah, as you know, we want to take prisoners with us as addicts. You know, we don't want to do it alone, and we don't really care about the consequences. It's very narcissistic addiction. You just turn into a emotionless and feelingless, selfish arsehole. You really do.
And what about when you then started another business and you were financially being successful?
Since being clean?
Yeah, since being clean.
Yeah, so that's gone okay. Yes.
How do you cope with the fact that you now have money to burn, so to speak, that you would have used, but now you don't use?
I still like to spend my money. You know, I've got a soft spot for expensive things. You know, I like a nice car and shoes and wallets, bags and watches and stuff like that. And that's kind of really...
Zach, there's nothing wrong with a nice watch.
No, there isn't. I mean, I'm not really wearing one now, but I do like nice things. I like abundance, but I'm not dependent on it. This is the difference, you know. I used to buy these things because I thought they made me look good. Now I buy the things because I like them, and if I lost them, it wouldn't mean shit. But, you know, back in the day when I lost my business and I lost, you know, everything I had, it ripped my entire life apart. Like, I had invested my entire worth into the success that I had made around me, into the material or the physical. And then that's a very fragile existence because you're not really in control of that, not entirely. You know, anything can change in the world that can, you know, disrupt most businesses. So the minute that's taken from you, like it was for me, that was why those years were the worst 2 years, because I just felt so broken and so lost and so alone, and like I'd lost everything and everything was for nothing. So now my worth isn't rooted in anything I've created out externally. My worth is, I'd say, based upon how much I invest into myself mentally and spiritually on a daily basis, because it can't be taken from me. So, I mean, that's mine. No one can ever take that away from me. And if I ended up living in a one-bedroom flat and struggling, I know I'd always have that. So, yeah, it's the option to use as well. Even though I've got money, that's just ridiculous. Like, to me, I just couldn't imagine ever using it ever again. I've got such a...
At what point, just cutting you off slightly, sorry for a second, just when you said, I can't imagine ever using again, which is a profound, wonderful statement. But where in your journey did you suddenly feel that? When did that suddenly kick in and go, I know I'm never, not just saying I'm never going to use again, because all addicts say that, right? But actually believing, knowing, being a core part of you. At what point in your journey did that happen?
Sadly, it came at the cost of my son's well-being, I guess, because it was only when I hurt him so badly that I realised enough was enough.
How did you mean? How did you hurt him so badly?
Because we were... this was what made me go to rehab. This is what made everything change. This moment was the thing that was enough. You know, losing the business wasn't enough. You know, hurting myself wasn't enough. But hurting him, that was a different story for me. Because I saw myself. I saw the child that lost his mum in him. And I thought, I cannot do this to him. And it was when we were practicing, you know, despite being a user, I still did a lot of things as a father with him. I tried to be as consistent as I could. And we were practicing for this gymnastics competition. And every day it was really, really important to him that you know, we practice it. And then the day before the competition, you know, we're supposed to be going to school, getting on a bus, going to this event, and so this, you know, it's this competition. And I used the night before all the way through. It always seemed to happen like that as well. Whenever there's a big event or something that you're supposed to show up for, it was always something that I don't know what that's about, but and I'd used all the way through to the morning. I could barely speak. His mum was calling me, screaming down the phone, "What the fuck are you doing?" And his school was calling me, and I just turned the phone off, and I just said, "Archie, I'm really sorry, mate. We're gonna have to stay home today." And being the loving son that he was, he said, "It's okay, Daddy. I just want to be with you anyway." He spent the rest of that day sitting with me on the sofa, in and out of consciousness, only really having any attention when he woke me up for something to eat. And the next day he went to school. Sorry, that night he went back to his mum's, and the next day he went to school, and then the following day he would have come to mine. And then when he come through the door, he seemed to have held it together until this point, because when he walked through, he seemed okay. And then I said, "How has your day been?" And then that was it. He just broke into tears.
What age was this?
He would have been 5.
Okay.
Yeah, he broke into tears and said, "Dad, I didn't get my medal. Everybody else had medals. I missed my competition, and he cried his eyes out. And that was, it was one of the hardest things I ever saw.
Probably one of the best things you ever saw.
Yeah, it's always
in hindsight.
Yeah, it's just the first time I ever really witnessed the level of which my problem had the consequences. It was the first time I'd really witnessed consequences outside of me, because adults, they have an option. My ex, she had an option to leave. So she chose to be with me. She's got equal responsibility as far as I'm concerned in staying with an addict who's a nightmare. Leave. And
so how you think of it?
Kids don't have a choice.
I agree. But sometimes a partner can be so deeply in love that they want to save you. And sometimes if they just leave you, could that not be seen as, well, they've abandoned me as well? What hope have I got?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps I can only use that to describe my own experience with it. She could have left and should have left. There was no way that anybody should have stayed with me. No, I wasn't a good partner. It wasn't just my addiction. I was not equipped to deal with love. I was not equipped to deal with commitment to another female. I was not a good partner for anyone, and anyone could see that. Although there was a really lovely side to me that came out now and again, and I guess that gave people hope that I would remain that person, but I could never be it consistently because I was terrified of being that person. That was the real me, but being that person left me vulnerable and open to pain. I learned that as a kid, that I had to not be sensitive, to not be emotional. If I cried, I got hit harder. So it was very quick to shut that part of myself off. And that happened when I went to the hostels. I changed. I wasn't that sweet boy anymore. I was angry. And I guess I was just always conflicted. I always had these two parts of me, the person I'd created to be safe and the person who I really was.
And what happened to your tribe, those people that you used with?
Couldn't tell you.
You just walked away from them?
Yeah. No, it was, looking back to my childhood, I don't know anyone really from my childhood. Some of the lads, I know one or two lads that I barely remain in touch with.
I'm thinking about the ones you used with.
Yeah, and they're talking about, these aren't, it's the same people. The lads I used with growing up, I don't really know any of them. And one or two, as I got a bit older, I probably speak to one. But that's maybe once a year because, they're still in that life. But as soon as I come out of rehab this time round, like I said, that moment with Archie was the moment that I knew it had to change. And I went to rehab about a month later. But I didn't stop necessarily using that. I knew going to rehab was when I was going to stop, but I knew it had to change. I knew that this was the end of that part of my life because I had a choice. About a week or so later from that incident, I was still using. I told his mum I can't see him anymore. That was the other thing. I couldn't not see him. I could not be his dad. So I knew I wasn't fit to be his dad right now. And then I was using constantly for the next week or so. And then I just woke up one morning after God knows how many days awake and just looked at myself in the mirror. I genuinely just thought, this is it. Like, you're either going to kill yourself right now. I'd made silly attempts at, overdoses, 20 diazepams and loads of coke and ended up in hospital a few times. But there was never, I always kind of thought my body could take it because my body was just incredibly good at consuming drugs. I think that's probably from my mum. But this time was the first time I genuinely thought, this is something that I want to do. And it was either that or choose a new way to live. And again, the only reason that I found the only thing that I could find reason to live for at that moment was him. I couldn't leave him. I couldn't. His life would be so different without me, and he would go down the same path that I did, maybe worse. So that was it. That was the thing that made me go. And I knew then that was it.
Was that at the age 29? Was he went to rehab?
29,
yeah. And that was the turning point. That was it.
Yeah, that was it. 5 years ago last month.
Very good. 5 years last month.
Yeah.
Good man.
Thank you.
So how's your life changed now that you're clean, sober and free?
Oh, it's changed so much, but it's changed year to year. The first year was incredibly hard, when you stop. I feel like stopping taking drugs is the easy bit. It's facing yourself after that. Or that's the... You're still left with a really broken human being, not just for the things that you did throughout your addiction, because you've got to cope and process and deal with all of the things that you've done, but then also what happened to you in the first place that made you an addict, that made you susceptible to addiction. Because generally the reason, I don't know if you agree or not, that every single addict has one thing in common that I've ever seen, and that's low self-worth, insecurity, that a lot, some form of self-hatred, and that always comes from somewhere, and you've got to go back and deal with that as well. And for some people that's bigger incidents than others. For me, it was 5, 6, 7 years of trauma that I had to go and relive and face each and every single moment. So yes, it was wonderful to be clean. It felt great. But the work that I've had to do throughout, especially the first year, I spent a week in bed crying through opening up wounds from therapy and actually feeling what it was like to be that boy, that child, witnessing that. Because as a child, you just disconnect. You learn. The brain has a really beautiful ability to help you in that moment as a child, because it would just be unbearable for me to experience what I was physically and emotionally at that point. To actually try and process that as a 7 or 8 year old boy, it was just impossible. So my brain figured out a way. But the thing is, I had to turn that mechanism off. And when you do that, it's overwhelming and it's fucking brutally painful to start experiencing those moments again and reliving it and doing it all. And it's the last thing you want to do. If anything, you just want to bury your head in the sand like you always have. You can't. And you got to keep going every single day, every single week. Get up and do the same processes and learning different things on how to heal and how to manage yourself, and constantly looking at the behaviors that you got, the thoughts that you have, all of it abnormal, all of it stuff that you don't want, all of it things that you want to change, and it's never ending. So my life externally is beautiful. The love that I have is in abundance with my son and my fiance. So for that, I'm so grateful, but it's a challenge.
How's your relationship with your son now?
It's unbelievable. Yeah, it's unbelievable. He's my best friend. He's my everything. And I'm so proud of him. He's so much better than I ever was. So all I ever want is for him to be the best version of himself and to be better than I ever could have been. And he's already there, in every aspect, as a human being, as a young man, as a footballer, as a student, as a son, he's just better on every single platform. So yeah, I just couldn't be more proud of him. I really couldn't. He's just so intelligent as well. And I think, I try my best to be a good father by being the best me, not necessarily telling him how to be, because he's going to innately copy everything I do. So if I'm not showing up for myself every single day, and I'm not prioritizing my self-worth and healing or growing and being the best me, then he's not going to do that. So I always feel like the best way to parent is to parent yourself, and he'll just copy. And yeah, I hope that, the damage I caused in the first 6 years of his life doesn't end up causing him harm as he gets older as an adult. Maybe it will, but I'll always be there. I'll be there to help him through every bit of it. And from what I can see, though, I think I caught it just in time.
I know we were speaking before we came in the studio earlier on today, and you were telling me about the things that you do almost on a daily basis. You have a routine, a strategy to ensure you keep clean. Just share with the listeners what your routine and what the things you do are, Zach.
Yeah, so I wake up every morning, normally at the same time, 6 o'clock. If I'm having a lay-in, which might happen once a week, I'll do it I'll sleep till 7, but normally 6 every day. I don't look at my phone or any technology or anything. I go straight into another room. I light some Palo Santo. I do a little prayer. I'll do meditation. I'll then do yoga. I'll then journal, and then I'll read, and then I'll do an ice bath, and then I'll take handful of vitamins and that's my morning every single day. And I've been doing that consistently now for the last, I'd say, 18 months. And prior to that, I have always been doing those things. I would just say I haven't done all of them every day. So yeah, that's the level of work that and also therapy every single week. I did for 4 years, and for the last year I've done therapy once a month for a 2-hour session as opposed to 50 minutes. So yeah, and that work's ever ending, it's never going to stop. And I might swap and change things out. Like I used to do breath work. I did that every day for 2 years. And I swapped that out for yoga. I think it's good to invite new things in to see what changes they make. And it can become a bit mundane doing the same thing. But honestly, it is so hard. It is so hard, regardless of what's happening in your life, whether you're under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure in any other area, to be consistent at that. Some days you just don't want to do it. You just think, I just want to shut the world off today. And yes, but because you do it consistently in the good days, I find, when life is well and things are easy, then when the chips are down perhaps, or you're going through a difficult moment in your life, whatever it may be, you're so used to the routine, you're so consistent at it that you just pull yourself through and you go through and you do it.
I think sometimes when you don't feel like doing it are some of the best times that you do it.
Absolutely.
It's like going to the gym. Like sometimes you just don't feel like going to the gym, but yet you can have one of the best workouts in your life. And that's exactly the same thing, right?
I think so. I think it's more important that you do it when you're not well, or you're feeling, not as in like if you've got physical unwellness, but as in if you're mentally unwell, or you're struggling emotionally with something that's going on in your life. That's when you need to show up. And I think this is kind of a big misconception about when you're in those situations, you should just rest, or you should just kind of take it easy. And like some people I know say, oh yeah, I get depressed, so I just switch off. I might have a week where I'm just not doing anything. I'm staying in bed and I just eat shit food and I do this. And I'm just like, that's the opposite of what you should do, in my opinion. I just think that's absurd. I think that, if anything, this is where you've really got to show up for yourself, not let yourself down.
Well, it takes a lot of energy to be depressed.
Yeah, and I think if anything, all you're doing is prolonging it. And I think some people will accept that depression is part of their personality, and I don't agree with that. I think they just go, oh, I know when I'm going to get depressed, so I just kind of see it come in and then I allow it to come and then I just see myself through it and then eventually I'm out of it again. And not doing anything to understand why. Not doing anything to heal or stop it or prevent it from happening in the future. They just, or same with anxiety. I think anxiety is it's a problem of the mind, and it can be cured if you understand the reason. Everybody thinks anxiety is a problem with the future, being scared of what's happened. I don't agree. I think anxiety is something that happened in the past that's made you afraid of the future. So to heal anxiety, in my opinion, you've got to go back, figure out what it is that happened. And when you've done that, it will relay into the fears and anxieties that you have today. It won't be, and then you can understand it's not about the present moment. It's, oh, okay, I don't need to feel anxious. I'm just worried about the fact that my mum was going away in an ambulance all the time. This person leaving me today, they are going to come back. They are going to come back. I don't need to feel anxious. You know what I mean? That's what I did, because I suffered massively when I stopped using drugs. And I just worked back. I worked back and figured all these things out. So yeah, there's so much work that everybody can do, and nobody is incapable of doing all of this work. It's just a decision.
You're currently writing a self-help book on addiction. Is that, you find that quite a cathartic experience for yourself?
Oh, do you know what? I find it effortless. It just pours right out of me, and I enjoy it. I mean, I've written 9 chapters in about 3 months. It's just been really easy to write, and I think it's going to be so helpful for people to pick up a book that, one, is written in a way that they can understand. It's not like overly vocabulary wise. It's not like really hard to grasp, and it's written in a way that I speak, so that anybody can understand it really, and they can see my process of how I've changed and how I've healed, and how also traumas have affected me as a child, how they have manifested into behaviors as an adult, and then how I've overcome them, and so I'm giving people real life examples of things that they'll be able to relate to, and actions and behaviors that they might have in themselves, and then showing them where I looked to find the answer, and then showing them the process of which I'd used to overcome and to change. And to, a great saying from Carl Jung is, I am what I choose to be. And no, I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become. And I am now as more of what I choose to become than what I was made to be. And I show people how to do that. That's what the book is going to be about, I hope. And yeah, there's loads of different processes and things that you can go through in there, whether it be from therapy. There's a whole chapter on therapy, how I engage with my therapist and everything that I learned from that process. There's a chapter on spirituality and everything I've learned about that and how it's changed my life, and meditation, breath work and ice baths and all the concepts behind all of those things and why they all work. So yeah, I'm excited about the book, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be amazing.
What's your opinion on nature or nurture? Like the fact that, was this a genetic predisposition? Was it the way you were brought up? Was it the environment? Was it the abuse? How do you feel for like generalizing addiction?
I genuinely think that people become addicted because drugs give them something that they didn't have before. It's the only reason, because you'll never find somebody who's completely secure within themselves. Well, at least I haven't, and they become an addict, because when they take drugs, it doesn't give them anything. So most people, when they take cocaine or they drink alcohol, it might give them confidence.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? It'll give them an addition, something where it makes them feel better than what they were before. As in, I feel like they're a better version of themselves with it than without. So therefore, the necessity to keep using starts to creep in.
Yeah, it's true. But I also think sometimes that they could also be a confident person, but using makes them even more confident. I know a few people who are the life and soul of the party, like people who are like in charge of the rugby team, and like they're confident and they're out there and they've got loads of friends and on the outside, okay, we know on the outside,
Yeah.
right? But when they use, they have a good fun with their friends. So they started using because they have fun with their friends, but then eventually it becomes like you have a compulsion to use.
Well, you've just described me. So that's exactly how I was, even before I started using. So I started working on the market stall, and it enabled me to communicate really well. I was deep down, I'm insecure, broken, I've got low self-worth, self-hatred from the childhood I had. Subconsciously, didn't know any of that. But I'd created this confident character.
Persona.
Yes. So it's very easy to see and perceive someone as that, but I was not confident. And as soon as I stopped taking drugs and I started working on myself, I became extremely withdrawn from, social environments and situations because I felt way less comfortable.
The mask is off. Yeah. This is the real me. I'm vulnerable.
Absolutely. But this is the thing as well. It wasn't just when I used, this character was in play all the time. And I think that's why you end up having to use drugs, because the show can't go on. It's impossible to maintain that level of deception for the majority of your life. You're constantly hiding from yourself, and deep down subconsciously, you know it. So as much as you want to keep this show going on, it's exhausting because it's not real, and none of these things that people think about you are real, and there's no way you can avoid the truth. So the drugs enable you to carry on. They help you cope with the ignorance that you need to kind of have to yourself. They block everything out, but eventually, they stop working too, and that's when it's time to either die or live and find a new way. But to answer your question about nature versus nurture, it's a hard one because I know people have had really lovely, wonderful upbringings, but I don't think that a lovely, beautiful childhood stops you being an addict.
I agree. Definitely doesn't.
But one thing I will say is that even if you have that lovely childhood, something somewhere can happen in your life, a relationship, a friendship, someone bullies you, whatever it is, something happens that triggers a low self-worth or a self-hatred, or that I am not enough. And as soon as that I am not enough thought has cemented in your mind as a belief about yourself, then you are susceptible to addiction. And I don't think that is anything to do with nature versus nurture. I guess it is environment. So it is kind of nurture, but it's not that wasn't to do with the parents, they had a lovely upbringing. They just met a terrible person that, beat the shit out of them, abused them, and made them feel worthless. And then from that point onwards, their lives changed forever.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I did on one of my podcasts, it's already out, an interview with Professor John Marsden, who's head of addiction for the psychiatry and psychology department at King's University. And he was talking about how there is a marker now that they have found of a genetic marker that means you have a predisposition to have an addict, to become an addict.
Well, then that answers the question.
Yeah, and in the same way that someone with blue eyes, like yourself, has more of a genetic predisposition for alcohol because of the chromosome change. So I think there's a slight genetic marker in there, but I think it's more of the nurturing. I think it's more of the upbringing. I think that certainly has more of an impact, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily just say or label it towards the parents or the upbringing. It's environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's environment. So it's obviously, as humans, we wake up our opinion of ourselves and how we feel about ourselves predominantly from three things: hereditary, so your parents, environment, the surroundings you're in, and suggestion of others and out of the world around you.
Yeah, definitely.
So we are flawed in that respect. Because
I'd call suggestion influence, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're flawed in that respect because it's the wrong way, So we've basically grown up our whole lives taking the opinion of others to determine how we feel about ourselves. So that's where the problem lies. So that encounter can happen anywhere, at any point in anyone's life. So, someone might have up until they're 20 the most perfect and idyllic life, but then they meet someone toxic who completely sabotages that, and their life's changed forever. You know, one of my friends, I can speak freely about her. You know, she had the idyllic life. She didn't know her real dad, but she had a stepdad. She called him dad. Beautiful childhood, and she loved him. So there was no issue there. Had everything she could ever want. But at 13, she was what's it called when a paedophile was groomed by a paedophile. He was 19, and she ended up getting pregnant and abused, and it changed everything.
Yeah,
just like that. Her worth changed. You know, she went from feeling loved, cared for, and worth to something. I don't know. This happens a lot with people who have been a victim of sex abuse as a young age. Dirty, disgusting, and that's self-hatred. And those are the people, regardless of what stage they've happened, that's happened in their life. In my opinion, they're the ones that are susceptible to addiction more than anyone else. Because when they give it, it gives them two things: an escape and something they didn't have before. You know, they don't have to feel the pain or that dirtiness anymore, or, you know, you don't have to feel shy or like you're not good enough, because you can just be this other person quite easily with these drugs. I need to keep doing this. People like me more when I do this, you know, and you convince yourself of this story that's just not true. And I look back at my behaviour when I was using, I was just awful, you know, but at the time, it convinces you that you're better.
And at that time, you feel it's the only way to cope with certain situations. An argument, stress, lack of money,
Success.
Too much money.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
You know, it's a celebration and it's a way to release stress. It's everything. You know, it's your answer. It becomes your friend. It's your go-to. It's the one that's with you all the time.
Yeah. I use this analogy, actually, when you say your friend. I use this analogy sometimes. I say it's a bit like being in a relationship, right? Like when you meet a girl or a boy, depends on which way you are, right? You meet a girl and it's like, you know, the relationship isn't right. You're arguing, it's toxic. But you don't leave the next day, right? Mm-hmm. It's often months or years before you leave a relationship that you know isn't right. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with cocaine. Like, you know it's a bad relationship, but it can take years before you get out of that relationship.
I think cocaine's more cunning. So cocaine doesn't give you the red flags right at the start sometimes. You know, the same as some relationships.
That's true.
Some relationships, but a lot of the time we ignore red flags because we don't want to be alone. It's especially if you're dependent on, you know, the attention or the love of another. You'll ignore red flags and you'll think, oh, I can change them, I can help them. You know, this is a project.
White knight savior.
Talking about myself here as well. That's kind of thing that I used to do. But the drugs is very discreet and, you know, and subtle, and it happens over time. You know, you don't see consequences of using cocaine for the first 3-4 years at times. I didn't. You know, I was using on Friday, sometimes on a Saturday, got to work on a Monday, smashing life.
That's what happens in the beginning.
That's what I mean. So it's more cunning than that.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? You don't see any
up on you.
No red flags, and then suddenly year 3, bang, it's taken Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off you, and Monday's gone because you're knackered.
How the fuck did that happen?
Bang. That's what I mean. So that's the difference, I guess, in that analogy, is that, you know, cocaine is such a great drug at the beginning because it doesn't really have that many consequences other than maybe a bit of sleep deprivation, but it cures hangovers, stops you being drunk, you know, makes you feel more confident, you know, all of these things. You think that you're getting away with it. Who wouldn't want to take it? Who wouldn't want to take it? But the thing is, nothing comes for free. There's no cheats. There's no shortcuts in life. You know, if you want confidence, you've got to earn it. You've got to grow. You've got to mature. You've got to find out why you're not confident. You know, you can't just take this magic pill. Otherwise, everyone would do it without some consequence. The universe doesn't work that way. It will come back to collect, and it will take your life.
Talking about magic pills, I asked this question actually about 2 years ago, maybe not quite 2 years, 18 months ago, I'd say. And I said, if you could take a pill that stopped you ever using cocaine again, would you take it?
Well, I wouldn't need to now.
No, I know. Before, in those throes, would you have taken it?
I would, yeah, definitely. But only at the point where I was seeing the consequences, because I wanted to stop using when I was 24, you know, and that took me 5 years. So, yes, I would have taken it at 24. If you'd asked me at 22, I said, fuck you.
Yeah.
I said, no, fuck, get that thing away from me. Yeah. Got the other pills, though.
Yeah. Zach, I always ask all my guests the very same last question. What advice would you give to anybody listening right now who's struggling with addiction to cocaine?
That it's okay and that you're not alone, and that it will be okay. It will be okay if you are willing. When it hurts enough and if you're in enough pain right now, then you're coming to the end of your using. So I always feel like people will stop using only when they're ready. You know, and everybody will know when they get to that moment. And I've spoke to every other addict I've ever worked with, and they all say the same thing. This happened or this happened. I got to this place in my life, and it's coming. If it's on your agenda, it's coming. And if you're failing, don't kill yourself for it. As in, don't beat yourself up for it every single day. Don't sabotage yourself. Don't beat yourself up. This is the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my life, you know, and the work is continuous after, but fuck me, it's worth it. It is so worth it. My life is so different today. You know, people talk about, you know, do you miss this? Do you miss that? Absolutely fucking not. Like, I couldn't think of anything worse than sitting in between 4 different walls every other weekend, sniffing a load of gear. Like, it's all it is, isn't it? You're going to a different...
Getting up paranoid, checking the cameras, getting back to do another line.
Yeah, but I mean, even the drinking side of it, you know, people going out clubbing and stuff like that. Like, I can dance and I don't need a drink. Like, but I go out to those environments. I don't have to embarrass myself anymore. I don't even desire to be in that environment. You know, there's so much more to life than alcohol, than drugs. Like, life is just full of love and happiness and experience and just wonder, you know, and you're missing it. You're missing it right now. So don't be worried about the change because, oh my God, you'll never look back. I promise you.
Zach, thank you for coming clean with me.